I love what future me can do. Thanks for watching.
So for this project, I'm starting to mill up some wood. These are maple. These are cherry. So I've cut them on my table saw, and now I'm just I don't have a jointer. So I'm going to put them through my thickness planer to get a gluable surface. And it doesn't have to be all surfaces, just one on these, two on these. Then we'll glue them up. I've got 2 feet of these long ones and a little over a foot of this, so I'm going to have about 5 feet of what's going to be glued up for the chevron. That should give me lots. I didn't show the glue up, but I just sandwiched a piece of cherry between 2 maple. The next step is to cut these into the chevron pieces that I need. I just used a stop on my miter saw. The angle is not super critical here, nor is the length. I obviously want them to be somewhat close, but close is good enough. So here the angles have been cut. Now you can see how they go together. I turn one over and flip it, and that gives me the chevron pairing, which is 2 pieces, as you can see here. So I was scrambling a little bit to get wood. And I ended up using a piece here that's a little thin. That's 1 inch. This is almost 1.25 inches. Ideally, they would have been uniform. Ideally, they would have all been thicker. This is thick enough. 1 inch is thick enough. I've tested it. It's going to make a 12-inch circle. And the width of this, given the arc that's happening on a 12-inch circle, this gives me plenty thick, because I only want the feature ring to be 1/2 inch thick anyways. So that gives me lots. It allowed me to use up the wood that I had. So we'll be fine. We're just going to go ahead and do a rub joint on all these and end up making 12 of these. 12 because it's basically a segmented bowl. And I've got 15-degree angles. I'm going to cut 15-degree angles. So therefore, I need 12 of them. And that'll work out fine. So the next step is to make this chevron pair. And I'm just going to rub some glue here on the end grain. I did take these pieces here on the gluing surface and just ran them on a piece of flat sandpaper to remove any feathering. So this joint is known as a rub joint. So I just put lots of glue. I put it on both sides. It is end grain, so that will absorb the glue. And then you can see there, I just rub it back and forth a little bit, and that glue will actually grab fairly quickly. And that's all I do to it. There were a couple pieces that I did end up clamping, but for the most part, this is all that's required. And I did this 11 more times. So here I'm just cutting off the top, and eventually I'll cut the bottom off. I just put a stop on my miter saw. And here you can see the tops are all cut off. Now I'll work on the bottom. It's not super critical with this either. I just want to have a nice smooth surface so I can continue the next step in the process. Here you can see the ribbon of the chevron laid out. In order to make this next step, the chevron into a ring, I need to cut it to 15 degrees. So I'm going to use my compound miter saw for this. So I made up a template on my laser engraver that is exactly 15 degrees. But to my pleasant surprise, after I made this template up, which is very accurate, I found out that the stop on my miter saw was exactly in the right place. So that's all I needed in this case. So making this ring is effectively the same as creating a segmented bowl. I cut each of these chevron couples to 15 degrees and then glued them together. And they fit very well, and I used 2 gear clamps to bring it all together until the glue had dried. Once I had it all glued up, the next step was to mount it on a flat board, which is on a faceplate. Now I've cut that to a round circle, and now I'm just using double-sided tape to hold this ring in place, at least initially. You'll see here in a minute I'll apply some glue as well. But this gives me an ability to position it and to be able to adjust it so that it's perfectly centered. Again, because this ring outside is a ring that I turned on the lathe, I can use it as a reference point and make sure that I get my ring centered perfectly. I don't have a lot of thickness to spare. Once I get that done, I'm just going to put some clamps on it to hold it in place and check it a couple more times to make sure it hasn't moved and to make sure that it's perfectly centered. Once that's done, I'll put some hot melt glue on the inside just to give it some extra hold. Once I'm satisfied with the positioning of it, then the next thing is to just start turning the outside. And just like a bowl, I'm just using my bowl gouge going down the outside of this feature ring, and I want to keep it uniformly thick throughout, so straight walls, but just make sure that I take away any roughness that may already be there from uneven thicknesses when I glued it up. I stop it quite occasionally just to inspect it to make sure that I've gone as far as I need to, because I don't want to go any further than I have to when thinning it out. I'm taking very light cuts, again, just because it's glued into place, not held as firmly as it would be if it was in a chuck. Stop one final time just to do an inspection to make sure that it's smooth all the way around. Once I've done that, then I just take my scraper and give it a final cut so that the surface is relatively smooth. Now I realize that I did not show the inside turning on this. It looked very similar to the outside. And I didn't take as much off the inside. I wanted to maintain the thickness. I'm going to have to fine tune this again once I mount it on a bowl. Now you saw me sanding the top here. Right now I'm holding it with my jumbo jaws, and you can see there I just expanded those. They happen to be just the right size that I could expand them into the ring and then sand that surface flat. By putting a board across it, then that guarantees that I'm uniformly flat all the way around. And that's going to be the bottom of my bowl. So again, the purpose of doing this in the first place was to create a feature ring that I will add to a bowl. So this video is just covering the feature ring, but I will be in a subsequent video adding it to a bowl. Now I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this picture and saying that the feature ring is not uniform. It is an optical illusion. It's just as thick on this side as it is on the other. It is uniform all the way around, I can guarantee that. The other thing is, seeing this, it's also not a finished surface, but again, I'm gluing this onto a bowl in a subsequent video, and at this point, I just wanted to maintain the maximum thickness so that I would have a better gluing surface. Once it's glued into the bowl, then I will do a finished sand on the whole bowl, including this feature ring. So stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't, so that you don't miss it, part 2 of this video.